Okay, question from the jury. When the reconstruction was an approximation, how close was it? Was it close in inches, feet? I mean, how far off was it?
I would say inches.
Okay. The wear marks on the back of the couches make it look like they were up against the back wall. So what was the point if it's not a real reconstruction? Can you answer that?
I can't. I mean, if the couch is removed, marks on the back of the couches, I'm not sure what they could be.
Okay. Anything else from either side?
Yes, Your Honor. So, Investigator Cowing, perhaps I didn't ask the right questions going into this, but are there going to be issues later in the case where the jury, it may be relevant to them, the size of the living room in general?
I don't think so.
Let me ask a different question.
Yeah.
In the investigation, was it a relevant fact to you, given some of the things you're investigating, the size of the living room?
Asked and answered.
No, it's a different question.
So let me ask the question, and let me try to ask a good question. Okay. In terms of the size of the living room during your investigation, having been in that room, was the size of that room relevant to some things in the investigation?
Yes.
And these types of things that it was relevant to, are they things that are down to 1 inch or 2 inch, or are they just things that it was helpful to be in the room and see the size of it for?
Your Honor, if I may, with the limited scope of what this witness has been allowed to testify about and how we have been restricted in what we can ask, this is a really big question. Essentially, is this relevant with respect to an investigation that spanned a long time? So we object unless the court wants to extend the scope of this witness right now.
We're not going to extend the scope of the witness, but this is relevant to this actual proceeding in terms of what the jury just saw and whether or not the fact that it's an approximation or not an approximation is important to them. So go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Investigator Cowing, let me try to ask this and stay right on the point that we're making, right? Have you ever heard that football is a game of inches?
Yes.
Whether you cross the goal line can be an inch or not an inch?
Correct.
But for the purposes of what we're talking about in the living room, your investigation didn't have questions that hinged on 1 inch. Was it more the room itself, like getting a feeling for what the room looked like?
Correct.
That said, you got out a tape measure and reconstructed that from the pictures and measurements that you had accurately.
Yes.
But whether they were pushed up exactly against the back of the wall, that's not the purpose for the reconstruction, is it?
It's not the purpose, no.
Okay. Did you find it helpful as you investigated this case to have
I'm
been...
I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Understood, Your Honor.
Do you have anything based solely on that?
Is that room big enough to throw a football in?
It's a fairly small room.
The question is, could a ball travel through the air in that room, or is it so small that a ball could not be thrown?
It's possible.
Sure. The way that it was reconstructed, you mentioned on third redirect that it was inches, not feet. You believe the approximation, but you don't know with respect to how far the coffee table is from the couch was to the TV stand. We could be talking about feet because you never took those measurements, right?
I don't believe so.
So you have faith enough in your approximation that you don't think that you're off by 12 or more inches on any of the things in that room?
I believe it's accurate.
You're guessing, right?
No.
But you're not basing it on measurements taken.
Okay, now you can step down. Thank you very much. You're good to go, Mr. Kelly. How long's direct on your next witness?
Certainly more than a half hour, Your Honor. That's what are you thinking?
Well, I'm just wondering if we should take a break or not. Do you guys want to go for 20, 30 minutes, or do you want to take a break now? Keep going? All right. I'll break around 3, maybe a little bit before. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Joe Clayton.
All right. Come on up, Mr. Clayton, up to the witness stand. Just over here. And then raise your right hand before you sit down. Do you solemnly swear or affirm and affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, I do. Thank you. Have a seat.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi,
Would you please start by stating your full name and introducing yourself to the jury?
my name is Joe Clayton, C-L-A-Y-T-O-N.
And Mr. Clayton, how are you employed?
I am retired, thankfully.
And how were you previously employed?
I was an agent with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and also with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation.
Should I refer to you now that you're retired as Mr. Clayton, or is there another way I should refer to you?
That's fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Clayton, I want to ask you if you were involved in a search warrant back on November 9th of 2012.
Yes, I was.
And back then, where were you employed at that time?
At the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, or the CBI lab in Grand Junction.
And what was your job then?
I believe I was an Agent 2.
Is that a title within the lab?
Correct.
Okay. And what is in, well, let me back up. In Agent 2, what does an Agent 2 do?
There are numerous sections of the laboratory that you can work in. There's also investigations, but I was on the laboratory side. An Agent 2 is just a ranking of those agents. I worked in blood and body fluids, serology, and I also did crime scenes for the state.
Does that involve crime scene processing?
Yes, it does.
Now, what kind of education goes into that career of crime scene processing?
Well, I have to say this is not like you would see on TV. So I have a bachelor's degree in biology, a minor in chemistry and in behavioral sciences. I have attended a lot of specialized training in crime scene reconstruction, homicide investigation, a lot of blood spatter interpretation, anything along the lines that would be handy at a crime scene.
And what year did you enter the field generally of crime scene investigation and lab work?
1991.
And you had mentioned 2 places you've been employed. Where were you employed in 1991?
At the Kansas Bureau of Investigation Main Laboratory in Topeka, Kansas.
And how long were you employed at the Kansas Bureau of Investigation?
3 years.
What type of work did you do there?
Again, I started off in the biology section doing blood. I was trained in hair and fiber analysis, but mainly doing blood and body fluids.
Okay. Is that what serology is?
Correction, yeah.
And what was can you describe the other roles that you had, like the work that you did?
Who's ever got that phone on, turn it off. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yes, Mr. Clayton. So you talked about serology is the analysis of blood and bodily fluids, correct?
Correct.
And then you talked about other work that you did in terms of crime scene work. Was that at Kansas Bureau of Investigation or at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
In both states.
So what other work did you do in crime scene investigation in the Kansas Bureau of Investigation?
I responded with another crime scene responder, and we would go and investigate whatever kind of scene we had.
Are these crime scenes?
Yes.
And did you work in the Kansas Bureau of Investigation with law enforcement?
Yes.
So what is the Kansas Bureau of Investigation?
Most states have a bureau like this. It's just a state level. If there's a situation like on a county line, I have jurisdiction in that state. So counties, I don't have to adhere to one county or another county. I can travel freely throughout the state and have jurisdiction.
Is that similar with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
Yes, it is.
When did you start there?
1994,
And then just to bookend it, when did you retire?
2015.
Did you spend the entire time from 1994 to 2015 at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
Yes, I did.
Did you have various roles there?
I did.
Can you talk to the jury a little bit about the roles that you had working for the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
I was an agent when I hired on. I got promoted to an agent 2. I then got promoted to an agent in charge of a group called InstaCheck. And if you buy a handgun in Colorado, we're the ones that would do the background check on that. I did that for a few years, but really didn't like it. So I took another job out in Grand Junction as agent in charge over the entire laboratory. And then I still missed my field work, so I took a voluntary demotion back down to an agent 2 so I could do the crime scenes full time.
And what do you mean by field work and doing the crime scenes full time?
Field work to me is going out, responding to a crime scene. An agency calls and says, we've had some happen. Maybe an officer-involved shooting. It may be, a murder-suicide. You just don't really know. And then it would be my job to go out to that scene and determine if we had enough people, if we had enough product, whatever we needed to do, and respond to those full time.
So are these what you might refer to as fresh crime scenes?
Not always. Sometimes they were discovered after the fact. We might have a body that has been found, for instance. So typically more fresh than aged.
Okay. So for example, would you respond to scenes where there had been a shooting?
Frequently.
Okay. Or a stabbing or something like that?
Yes.
Did you also respond to scenes where it was unknown what had happened?
Correct. We usually go as a death investigation, so I don't have that mindset of it's a suicide or it's a murder. I'm just going to see what the facts tell me.
And then in addition to that, you ever go out to places that were related to missing persons?
I did.
In what context would you do that?
Typically, somebody is missing. The local officers are just asking for assistance. So we, as the Bureau, can send out investigators and lab people, both, to assist them in seeing what we can determine.
And at times where you asked to discover, for example, if foul play was at hand?
We're frequently looking for that, yes.
So when you talk about processing crime scenes, what types of methods would you routinely use to process crime scenes?
Well, it kind of depends. If you have one decedent inside a motel room, or if you have a scene that maybe is miles long, it would determine, you just have to take an assessment of what you think you have going on here. And that may take a few minutes. We call it an initial walkthrough, just to assess, do I have enough people? Do I have enough product? Do I need more personnel? Are there dangers present? If there's gas leaking, or if it's in water, something like that, it could be dangerous. And then you come up with a plan. Basically, if I was referred to as a primary crime scene responder, and there were just 3 of them in Colorado. I would go out and lead the investigation, but I might determine that I want somebody else to take the photographs while I do the blood collection. So as a primary, I come up with a plan, and that just was tailored to what kind of evidence I'm trying to recover, how much of it I'm trying to recover, and where it is.
So, Mr. Clayton, you talked about a few things there that I just want to break down a little bit. You talked about taking photographs on the crime scene.
Correct.
Is that one form of evidence collection that occurs in the process of crime scene?
Yes, we have to photograph things as we find them. EMS and fire departments have a job to do, so the scene may be disturbed already by their efforts to contain something. That's not unusual at all. I had a rather extensive photography schools that I had attended 2 weeks at the FBI, just taking photographs. and I was the primary photographer for the state for a number of years, for Colorado.
Okay. And with regard to, I think you also talked about actual physical evidence collection?
Correct.
Is that a part of crime scene analysis as well?
Very much so, yes.
Can you talk to the jury about that?
I'm just going to use one of these bottles as an example. If I want fingerprints off that, the top of it has ridges where I probably can't find a fingerprint. So I'd pick that up. I'd be gloved, of course. I'd pick it up and put it in a paper bag. So it could be sealed properly, sent to the laboratory, and then it could be processed at the laboratory. I don't do very much processing at the scene. All I'm trying to do is secure and collect the evidence so it can be tested at the lab at a later date.
And with regard to evidence collection, you gave an example of taking an item that might be processed later. Do you also work in crime scene investigation to collect trace evidence?
I do, yes.
And can you explain that a little bit to the jury?
Well, it sounds kind of simple, but the lint roller is your friend in crime scenes. I'm trying to get the top layer, typically. So if I think there's been a tussle, I may take that lint roller and just roll it over, or my jacket, just roll it over and collect that. Take it, put that in plastic, hold it to itself, not the sticky part to itself, but fold it to itself and then put it in plastic so it can go to the hair and fiber trace unit to be examined at a later date.
And how about blood evidence?
Frequently encountered at crime scenes, and there's a number of ways to collect that. We chose to use sterile water and cotton swabs, typically, and I would take the 6-inch long sterile cotton swabs, open the package, moist the swabs, if typically the blood is dried by that time, and then swab that up and put them back in the paper, the swabs back in the paper, bag they come in, and then put that in protective envelope and get it ready to send to the lab.
When you talk about trace evidence and blood evidence and collecting that, is that something that you're looking to later perhaps do DNA testing on?
Frequently, we would do DNA. When that became a viable test, we would do DNA on it.
Okay. So if there's visible blood, do you collect it by the method that you just explained?
I would.
And then if there's not visible blood, are there other methods that you've used in the crime scenes you've processed over the years to look for the blood?
Yes, there are.
And so can you explain just a little bit about that to the jury?
There are several compounds known. What we chose to use at the CBI when I wrote the protocol is called Luminol, and it glows blue when you apply it to a blood stain. You have to have darkness to see it. You don't want interfering light, and it has a very distinct way of glowing and then diminishing as the luminol wears off. It's water-based, so if you can't see the blood stain, you don't want to just be pouring luminol on it. You want to use it very sparingly. You want just a mist to come out and settle gradually. You don't want to blow your stain away. So there's a number of chemicals out there. I believe it was called Blue Star was another one, and I was working with that company on their protocol. That product was used, I think, intended for hunters. If they wounded a deer or something, they could take basically the same chemical I'm using, luminol, and take it out and try and track their prey.
And so you mentioned designing or putting together the protocols for Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Can you explain to the jury the process you used to do that?
Since this other product had come out, this Blue Star, I wanted to check it, how effective it was, as opposed to the product I was using, which was luminol. I compared and contrasted, if you will, those two chemicals, talking with the company about what their product contained, because that's kind of important. I don't want something that will degrade the DNA, and talked to them, then wrote a protocol and decided on using luminol that we made in the laboratory. You can purchase the product, but you have to mix it with water and another chemical. But I just decided on a protocol, and I thought after all my testing and research that it would be better to stay with the luminol than to use a commercially available product.
And so what kind of research did you do into that?
Well, again, I had to know what they had in their product because I don't want to spray something that is detrimental to the blood stain. Blood is relatively fragile, and you can break it down like in sunlight, or if you spray a high acid content or anything that dilutes it. So I just wanted to make sure I was using the best product that the laboratory could have. So I researched out their product in the Luminol, and again, just came up with a protocol that I thought worked best for the laboratory here in Colorado. It's dry, and I settled on Luminol.
Now, is this, at what point in your career that started in 1991 were you assigned or responsible for designing these types of protocols?
That was when I was here at CBI in Colorado, so that was after '94.
Okay. And how far into your time here in Colorado? Like what year are we talking about?
Oh, I don't really recall. I'd say probably 10 years.
Okay. So you had 10 years of crime scene experience before you were assigned that?
I had the 3 plus 10, so 13 years at that point.
And throughout the years at CBI, do you repeatedly have trainings in different areas of crime scene investigation?
Colorado Bureau of Investigation has a week-long course that we would go out and teach to local agencies. And I was a primary instructor in that. And that's all areas of crime scene investigation.
What other areas did you teach in crime scene investigation?
Firearms, fingerprints, obviously the collection of blood or body fluids, sexual assault kits, hair and fiber, chemistry, which would be drugs, just all areas of the laboratory.
How about blood spatter analysis?
I was a certified analyst in blood spatter for a number of years.
And what does that mean to be a certified analyst in blood spatter?
Our laboratory works under a certification process where you're given tests throughout the year and see if you can answer those. They're designed so you have to answer those correctly. And when you do, then you're state certified or nationally certified in crime scene analysis or blood spatter interpretation or fingerprint identification.
Does the CBI laboratory, that's a government entity?
Correct.
Did they require accreditation of their laboratories?
All of the laboratories had to have accreditation.
And then did they require certifications such as the certification you just described for their employees that go out and do either instructing or processing?
Yes, you had to be certified to do that.
And then also, Mr. Clayton, you talked about luminol. Are there other tests that you would use in the field to see if there was blood present?
I said we don't do DNA or other processing out in the field. So I have a set of chemicals, or a set of tests, that I progressively tighten. I don't identify blood, but I can highly indicate the presence of blood. I will allow the lab to identify something. I will indicate the presence.
So, for example, if you see a red stain and you think it might be blood, are there tests you can apply to see if it's blood?
Yes.
What kind of tests would you apply?
Well, right off, visually, most of us know what a blood stain would look like. I trust my eyes, but I would use a chemical called phenolphthalein. Phenolphthalein is, again, a color-based test. If you swab it and apply the phenolphthalein and another chemical, it will turn pink. But that's just indicating blood. It could be earthworm, it could be mouse, it could be any kind of blood. And I would just progressively test further to tighten that circle, make sure I've got a blood stain.
So I want to walk through this process just a little bit now, but you talked about you either see a blood stain or you don't, right?
Right.
And if you don't, an option is to apply luminol.
Correct.
Hold on a second. Got something, Mr. Brent, or Buggy?
Yes, I have an objection. I felt like we were starting to, or the council was starting to certify and endorse this witness on an expert on a number of topics. And now I feel like this witness is actually testifying on the topic without that sort of
But he's not talking about this case. So why can't he do that in terms of the qualification?
That's my point. At this point, given the questions and the answers, as far as the council is concerned, if this is foundation as an expert or if it's testimony as a topic,
Well, he can.
I'm just asking if the foundation you lay before you go further. You want an EPA card, all that.
This is still the foundation, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
I don't see anything wrong with this. I mean, he's not talking about what he did in this case yet. It may be some of the same techniques, but I don't see any problem with that. Go ahead. Thank
you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Clayton, just to kind of to hone back in now. So you've applied Luminol over years. Is it fair to say in the entire time you've been a crime scene investigator, Luminol's been one of the tools you've used?
It's available to me, yes.
And is that something that you have seen in person, on crime scenes, know how to interpret, et cetera?
Correct, all of those.
And then you mentioned phenolphthalein. Is that another chemical you're familiar and skilled at using in the field?
Correct.
And then you were talking about hemotrace. Is that the test that determines whether that blood is then human or primate or not?
Hemotrace, or also called an ABA, ABA card, is a test that is specific to blood of higher primates. So gorilla, orangutan, I believe there's a lemur in Madagascar that's supposed to have a positive, or human, but it will not react to, say, mouse blood.
So in terms of all these skills that you've used, how many times have you been out on a crime scene responsible for processing a crime scene?
Unfortunately, when I started in Kansas, we didn't keep an accurate and precise count. I worked it up mathematically the other day, the other year, and it was, I think it came out to 1,007 is what my best estimate of my crime scene response has been.
So that's over about 2 decades?
Correct.
And that's been out there employing all these methods that you just explained to the jury?
Correct.
Have you testified as an expert witness before in these areas?
Yes, I have.
What areas have you testified as an expert witness in?
Blood pattern interpretation, crime scene investigation, crime scene processing, serology, photography. Can't think of any others right off.
Okay. Approximately how many times have you testified as an expert witness in a court of law for trial?
Well, again, when I started at Kansas, we didn't keep an accurate and precise count of the number of times I've testified. My best estimate is 350 to 400 times.
That you've been qualified by the court as an expert in one of these crime scene investigation or analysis forms?
Correct.
And then specifically, have you testified before as an expert in the processing that involved the use of luminol, phenolphthalein, and I called it hemotrace, but you called it something else?
It's the same, hemotrace or Abacard. Hemotrace is a brand.
And the collection of blood evidence in those areas specifically, have you been endorsed as an expert and testified as well?
Since the majority of my cases were crime scene or biology, just about all of them, I would guess.
So, Your Honor, at this time I'd move to qualify Mr. Clayton as an expert in crime scene investigation, including trace evidence collection and interpretation.
Mr. Bogan?
No objection as to endorsing the crime scene investigation regarding trace evidence collection. What was the other one?
Interpretation.
And interpretation of that.
No objection.
Okay.
No objection. I'm not by the mic.
Thank you. He'll be qualified as an expert in crime scene investigation, trace evidence collection, and interpretation.
Thank you, Your Honor. And at this point, we're going to move into an entirely different chapter, and I didn't know if this was a good time to break or if you'd like me to do that. We're going to have exhibits and things like that.
Okay. It's just we started a little early, so I thought we might want to break a little early, too. Let's take 15 minutes now. It's almost 5 till, so we'll start up again at 10 after 3. Oh, please rise for the jury. Okay, please be seated. Just a second. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Clayton, I want to turn your attention to November 29th of 2012.
Okay.
At that time, you were employed as a crime scene investigator 2 at CBI still.
That is correct.
If my math's right, that was about over 2 decades into your career and about 3 years prior to your retirement.
That is correct.
Were you called upon to respond as part of a team to 2343 County Road 500 up in Vallecito, Colorado?
Yes, I was.
And what was the information that you had going in?
Again, the CBI works by invitation. So the local agency, which was the Plata County Sheriff's Office, had gotten the FBI involved and had also requested my assistance because of my work with blood and body fluid and collection of crime scenes.
Was there a particular team put together to execute the search warrant?
Yes.
Who was that team?
I believe that was La Plata County Sheriff's Office.
And that's the agency, but in terms of the processing of the house, was there a team to do that?
Yes.
Was it an evidence response team? Is that what you call them?
Yes, they have a ERT or evidence response team, and I was part of that team.
And who has the evidence response team?
The FBI.
Okay. And then you as CBI were working in conjunction with both of those agencies you just mentioned, the Sheriff's Office and the FBI.
That is correct.
And did different people have different roles going into there?
Yes.
What was your role in processing this crime scene?
I'm not sure it was written down, but it was understood because of my expertise in blood and body fluids and in crime scene that I would be assisting searching and collecting any evidence.
When you say collecting evidence, are we talking about physical items laying around, or we're talking about biological evidence?
Mine was the biological aspect of the blood or body fluid.
And then I asked you about your information going in, but did you have any information going in about generally why you were looking and what you were looking for?
Yes, it was a very limited briefing, but I came down to the Sheriff's Office to have a briefing and was given some information on what I was walking into, potentially looking for, excuse me.
Okay. Was this, did they tell you whether it was going to be a fresh crime scene or an older crime scene or days later kind of situation?
It was days later, after the fact, that I would be involved.
Were you aware generally that there was a missing child who's been gone for 10 days?
Correct.
And what were you looking for in the home, if anything?
Anything of evidentiary value, obviously, and that would include the biologics that I was assigned to.
Was this based on a court-ordered search warrant at this point in time?
That is correct.
So can you just explain for the jury what you did when you arrived on scene?
We staged away from the scene, and then I believe it was Plata County Sheriff's Office officers executed the search warrant, and then we went in. One of the FBI, I can't remember his name, one of the FBI respondents and I went in and did our first assessment, had our PPE, our personal protective equipment, gloves, masks, on, and then went in and just looked to see what we had inside the house.
So what does it look like when you come up to execute a search warrant like this in terms of vehicle and personnel?
I was a laboratory person, so I don't actually give the search warrant. That's a law enforcement task. And although I am considered law enforcement, I am the laboratory person. I don't actually go up and hand somebody a search warrant.
And that's what you meant by execution of it, was the service of it?
Correct.
And then are there multiple law enforcement vehicles coming together to go out to the house at that time?
Yes, we all caravanned from the La Plata County Sheriff's Office here in Durango to the residence and staged across the street in an area where I think most of us could park.
Is that directly across the street from the residence you were going to search?
That's where I parked, yes.
And did that allow you to have some of your gear, protective gear you mentioned, testing gear, stuff like that?
Correct. We started getting ready.
And then were there also marked police vehicles, things like that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. What kind of vehicle do you travel in when you're going to do crime scene work?
As a primary, I had a specialty truck. It had a topper on it. It was an Ford F-250, I believe. And it had a topper on it. It had a bunch of shelving. And then if I needed more personnel, I could call, and we have a large response vehicle that has numerous shelves and cubbies that are available from the outside. So we had both vehicles finally there.
Okay. And then when you arrived on scene, you waited for someone to execute the service of the search warrant, and then you went into the home.
Correct.
And is this, as we talk about what you did in this case, did you do in this case what you do in all those other crime scenes that you previously processed in terms of the process you follow?
Generally speaking, yes, I use the same procedures. It just depends on what I walk into.
Okay. So on a situation like this where there's a missing child and it's been 10 days, what's the first thing you do when you start to work?
Again, I think the initial assessment is crucial. I go in, I'm actually inside the building or scene myself and get to see what I'm going to have to process. See if there are obvious stains, if there are not obvious stains, if there is damage, if there's, you know, a baseball bat or something that might be of evidentiary value, point that out and kind of take a mental look at what I've got. I'm not actually photographing or collecting yet.
Is it fair to call this like a walkthrough?
Correct, an initial walkthrough, yeah.
When you do the initial walkthrough, you go through the entirety of the residence that you're going to search?
It's kind of brief, but yeah, we do walk through all floors, check the outside. If it's cold, if it's snowy, look for shoe tracks, anything that might be evidentiary value.
And then is there someone accompanying you that's taking entrance photos to the crime scene?
In this case, the FBI was in charge of photography, not me.
And generally speaking, what are entry photos?
Just what it looks like when you get in. If it's very tidy or if it's in disarray, if there's an animal, say a dog loose inside, that can drastically change the crime scene response. We need to get the animal removed. If there was a blood stain, the dog might walk through it. I've had situations where there was blood outside of a residence and in the winter, and birds were eating it because it's food for them. And so there's all these things that might affect what I find when I walk in there.
So when they go through and do the entry photos, though, is that documenting the residence as it appears before you start working?
No, that is not documentation yet. It's just the special agent and I walking through the residence, seeing what we think we need. Obviously, we're going to have a photographer in there, but that photographer is not following us throughout the house at this point.
I see. So you do a walkthrough, and then the photographer goes through and documents it as it appeared when you arrived.
Correct. We don't want to be in those pictures. We want the pictures to show the residence or whatever we're examining, not us walking around the house.
But as you do that, you're looking, not touching at this stage of the investigation.
Correct.
All right. Then after you've done your walkthrough and the residence is photographed, then what do you do?
After we do the initial assessment, we walk outside and brief our teams on what we think we have. Do we have enough people? Are there additional scenes? Is there obvious evidence that we need to get? We break into our teams and then start the actual processing of the crime scene.
And is that what you did in this case?
Yes, it is.
And then when you went back in to start the actual processing, was there anywhere from the walkthrough that stood out to you as an obvious crime scene?
No.
And then, so what did you do when you returned back in with your plan on how to process?
We broke into the two teams, and I started looking for bright red or brown red stains that would be indicative of blood. I could not see any clearly with my naked eye at that point in time.
Okay. And then as you're going through, you go through the various rooms of the house, you go through the exterior, garage, crawl spaces, you look at all these places?
Yes.
And so let's talk about this case specifically. In this case, as you walk through the home, were there certain places that you, as you did, not the walkthrough, but as you went through the processing, that you did some testing on as you went through?
That is correct.
Okay. Specifically, for example, did you see some stains along the way where you applied phenolphthalein?
Yes.
And so can you just talk to the jury about that process of seeing something visually and applying phenolphthalein?
When I was out in the garage, there was, I would call it a rat trap, a large mouse trap, and there was blood staining around it, blood pattern around it. And I tested that with phenolphthalein, and it came back positive for blood. I then tested it with an ABA card, or that human higher primate card, and it came back negative. My assumption was it had killed a mouse or a rat, and it had bled some. There was also a Band-Aid in the garage that I tested, and I directed, it came back positive. and it came back indicative of human blood. So I noted the FBI collection team that they should collect that for us.
Okay. So this is an example of how you go through that process, basically.
Correct.
You're going to go test by test to see if it's worth collecting, and then you're going to collect it.
DNA is relatively expensive, and it's not wise to just, do any stain, send it for DNA. I'm going to try and make sure it's higher primate blood. And luckily here we don't have gorillas or orangutans, and so I can pretty much rule those out.
So in the instance where you find something that is human blood and you're doing this process, is it typical then for you to collect it for later testing?
If I deem it's of evidentiary value, yes, I will collect it.
Okay. So for example, the Band-Aid that was out in the garage, is that a fresh Band-Aid or an older Band-Aid?
It was an older Band-Aid.
And once you realize there's human blood on it, that's one of the things. Do you document then where you found it and collect it?
It's already been photographed, yes.
From the walkthrough with the entry photos?
Yes.
All right. And so did you go through other rooms in the house and do some testing as well?
I did.
Okay. So can you just kind of walk the jury through that?
It's just a quirk of mine, but normally I would start in one corner of the room and work counterclockwise. That's just how I make sure I know where I start and I know where I'm going to finish. It's very difficult if you have a multi-story residence and somebody downstairs is saying, hey, Joe, come down here. And then 2 stores up, they say, hey, come up here. So I try and do this in a very orderly fashion, and I did that in this case too. We started at the front door and swung around to the various rooms on the main level, one by one.
And as you're doing this process, are the rooms labeled in some way?
The FBI was in charge of labeling their rooms. A lot of people will letter them, A, B, room A, room B, room C, so you can tell what room you're in. I usually just say living room, kitchen, bedroom.
Okay. So for purposes of this, there were room letters because FBI had assigned them?
Correct.
So in going through, for example, did you do a test on the stain on the shirt from room B?
I did.
And how'd that come back?
It was negative.
Did you do a stain on the trash bag from room N, which was the garage?
Yes, I did.
How'd that come back?
That test was also negative.
Okay. And then were there other negative tests throughout that, or other tests and observations you made that you didn't note because they were unremarkable?
Correct.
So as you're going through, are you ruling out some of these areas in some of these rooms, and if you see a stain, you're checking and moving on?
Correct. I don't usually report out what I don't find or what is negative. Sometimes I do if there's not very many stains, but if I report out everything that I tested as negative, it would be a long day.
Okay. And so as you went through the entirety of all the house and all the rooms systematically, anything remarkable to the naked eye about this house?
It was generally tidy. I think there were some foodstuffs out in the kitchen where you would expect foodstuff to be. It was not in disarray. There were no pets present that I could find any evidence of. I would call it an unremarkable house in that sense.
Did you see an obvious crime scene?
No.
Okay. And then is that where you stop, or do you do more testing after that typically?
No, I did more testing. This is when I started thinking about getting the luminol out and using it.
And what would the luminol offer to help the situation?
Since I was unable to find the stain with my eyes, the luminol is more sensitive to that in the sense it's going to change color. My eye's not detecting it, so I'm going to look with luminol in the dark.
And can the luminol find blood that you can't see with the naked eye?
Yes, it does.
Does it also have some false positives that it'll indicate on?
Yes, it does.
What are some of those examples for the jurors?
Cupric salts or copper-based salts can do that, like Comet or Ajax, the old hand cleaner, the scrubbing. Bleach is noted, but the reaction visibly is remarkably different between that and blood.
How so?
Blood will, when you apply the luminol, when you miss the stain, the blood will start to glow, or the luminol will start to glow very bright and work down in intensity. So it starts up, comes up, peaks, and then fades out. You can get it to do that again if you miss, but you're just adding water to a stain that you can't already see. If you spray like Ajax or notably bleach, it will sparkle It's not that even glow up and then back down. It sparkles really intensely, and it's a remarkably, visibly different reaction.
When you talk about the blood reacting, glowing, and then coming back down, what type of time frame are we talking about here?
It's typically not very long. I'd say 30 seconds, maybe.
So it's a very dynamic process.
It is.
You spray it, it starts to illuminate, and then it goes away.
Correct.
And then if there's an area that you've uncovered of interest, then do you typically do further testing there?
If I have a luminol positive reaction in the dark, I'll take a cotton swab and swab where that luminol is glowing. That way I know where the stain is located, and then I'm going to test that with that phenolphthalein, which is a little more specific for blood than luminol.
And phenolphthalein, for example, will that also, does the phenolphthalein false positive on the things that the luminol does?
No.
Okay. So for example, if you sprayed bleach, even though you could tell the difference visibly, if you were then to apply phenolphthalein to that sample, would that test negative for blood?
I'm not sure I understand.
Yes. Luminol illuminates blood, but it also illuminates some other things.
Correct.
After you've got the illumination, does the phenolphthalein confirm that it's not one of those other things, but in fact blood?
No, again, it's a good indicator. If it's a positive test, it's another indicator that I've got a blood stain here. But it's an indication. I'm not going to identify yet.
Is it a separate indicator in terms of, would phenolphthalein test positive for blood if it were bleach?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I think the answer is no, but I'm not. If luminol works and phenolphthalein doesn't, I would probably collect it and send it to the lab, because the lab can discern that better than I can in the field. There may be something inhibiting that.
Are you talking about the serology, like the work you did in Kansas?
Correct.
At the lab? Okay. And so I guess what I'm getting at is you're using multiple tests so that you can rule out the false positives and know if you have a sample worth collecting. Is that fair to say?
That is correct, yes.
Like your example with the mousetrap. You're doing multiple tests there and you realize it's not human blood, so you don't send that off.
Correct. The mouse blood reacted with the phenolphthalein, as I would expect, but not with the human identification, the human card.
Okay. And so did you apply luminol in a room K in this case?
I did.
Was that a bedroom in the case?
I believe so. Upstairs?
Yeah. Why did you test there?
It was an area of interest to me. Although I didn't see blood, I just wanted to use the luminol, which is more sensitive than my eyes, and see if I had traces of blood in that room.
And did you have any traces of blood in that room?
No, I did not.
And was that a lived-in type of bedroom, like there was stuff in there, things like that?
It was normal, yeah.
Okay. And then after you found nothing in room K, were you done yet, or did you do testing in another room?
I went down to what I would call the living room to test.
Was that room B?
I don't remember how the FBI had that room. I believe that's correct.
I'm going to, Judge, with your permission, I'm going to publish previously admitted People 72.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Agent Clayton, or Mr. Clayton now, does that look like the living room that you processed in this case?
Yes, it does.
Now, can you explain to the jury how you went about processing this room?
I had an interest in looking for blood, what we would call occult blood that you can't see. Occult, that you cannot see. But I'm going to go in layers. I'm not going to move stuff. I'm not going to put a tarp over things, or I'm not going to alter it. I'm going to go from the top layer down. So you can see there's some bedding on the corner of the couch. That would be tested as it's found, turned over, do both sides, and then I'll do the couch. I wouldn't just spray blood or spray for blood once and leave the couch. I'm going to work in layers on this.
Now, you talked about, well, let me stay there for a second. So all these items in the room, too, are you not only spraying surfaces, but you spray items as well?
I did.
Okay. And then you talked a little bit about not wanting to spray because it can water down a surface.
It will dilute the blood that is indicated.
Can that make it difficult to collect a sample for serology?
It would.
And can that make it difficult to collect a sample for DNA if you're not careful?
It could.
Objection, move to strike, not an expert on DNA.
He's an expert in crime scene collection and investigation and interpretation, so I think this is within his expertise. Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. So as you were processing here too, you talked about occult blood, which would be blood that's not visible to the eye, but then you might find with the chemical processing.
Correct.
And not to overgeneralize, but is it often in situations where there could have been a crime scene days ago, if it's cleaned up, that you won't be able to see it with the naked eye, but the luminol could find it?
Calls for speculation. Objection. Also leading.
No, I'm not going to grant the leadings for sure. He's trying to direct him to a certain area. I think you have to lay a foundation.
Sure. So, Mr. Clayton, in situations where you can't see blood with the naked eye, is that typically situations where naturally there's not a lot of blood?
That could be one reason. Correct.
What are the reasons that it could be that way?
It could be out in sunlight, for instance, and have decayed to a point where I can't find it. It could have been removed by animals, as we've talked about. There's any number of reasons that that blood may not be visible.
Okay. And is cleanup one of those reasons in your experience as a crime scene investigator?
Sure.
And so, as you're looking, the point I'm trying to get to is that you need to be very careful if it's a situation where the blood's been cleaned up and there's not a lot there.
Correct.
So as you process this scene, what do you do to create a atmosphere where you can see the luminol?
We actually go low tech here, and I took black plastic trash bags and had them taped over the outside of the windows. So it just darkens the room, makes it easier to see the luminol.
Is it a situation where you need to get it pretty dark to see it?
Darker is better.
And then can you just explain for the jury so they know how you prepare the luminol formula?
Luminol is a chemical by itself, and there's a recipe I talked about, helped develop that for the Bureau. So I take a certain amount of water and add a certain amount of luminol, and then I think it's sodium hydroxide crystals. I'm not sure. It's been a while. But you mix that, and that doesn't want to go into solution very easily. So you have to agitate that or shake that for quite a while, maybe minutes, 5 minutes. And then I'm going to apply this with a spray bottle. I want a very gentle mist to come over and cover whatever I want to spray. But I also take a known bleach, a paper towel, and I put a little bit of bleach on it. I put some known blood on it, and then a blank area that nothing's on the paper towel. And I test that piece of paper towel with my mister to make sure that I see the bleach reaction, I know what the blood reaction looks like, and that there's no reaction if the surface is clean and blood-free. So that's just a control in the negative. I'm just applying good science to the application of luminol.
So you're making sure that the mixture that you've agitated is working?
Correct.
Why don't you use a high-pressure pump or paint sprayer type of applicator?
We actually tried that at one time. I think you get a better distribution of the product if you mist and you don't blow the blood away. Too much pressure will just kind of wash your surface, and that's not what I want.
In this process you talked about, is that still the process used at CBI now?
I'm not sure. I don't work there anymore, but I would be surprised if they've changed it. It's a very well-established method of application.
Okay. And then you talked a little bit about what it looks like if it fades in and fades out. But do you try to capture an image to kind of document that?
Photographically, you can do that in low light, yes.
And here, were you the photographer or someone else was the photographer?
Somebody else was a photographer from the FBI.
Is it, let's start with, I'm going to approach Your Honor with People's Exhibits 158 and 159.
All right.
Mr. Clayton, I'm showing you People's Exhibit 158, People's Exhibit 159. Have you seen those images before?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And of all the photographs that were taken from 72 to these, you've reviewed them,
Yes,
and you were present for, like, I know you weren't the photographer, but you were present when these photographs were taken?
that is correct.
Okay. Is 158 and 159 a fair and accurate picture of that pre-testing that you do,
Yes,
and that you did in this case?
yes. This is my controlled piece of paper towel, and this is a photograph of the luminol reaction with that piece of paper towel.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit People's Exhibits 158 and 159 into evidence.
No objection to 158, 159.
Both are admitted.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
So, Mr. Clayton, up on the screen there, I'm going to put 158 first. Is this an example of that reaction? Let me get to it. Now it's out of the way. Is that an example of how that reaction looks in the dark?
Yes, that's typical of the color that you will see. This is on my piece of paper towel. This is not a blood stain. This is my control in blank. You can see some of the paper towel is blank. There's nothing happening on that. It's not glowing.
And 159 just kind of shows how it was able to illuminate an area that's very difficult to see.
And these are basically, if you will, backwards for me. I would take a picture of the paper towel first in light, so you can see, you can't see blood on it, you can't see bleach on it, and then I would take a picture of it in the dark so you know my product is reacting like it should.
So from 159 to 158, the order that you do, that's the same, we're looking at the same.
Correct. It's just a piece of towel with stains on it, known stains.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what kind of stains? I just didn't hear.
Known, as in I know what I put on the paper towel.
So what do you use for your test?
As far as the blood or
When you're doing just the control sample?
bleach and my blood.
We move forward, let me put that down. And so I want to talk about the living room itself and processing it. What areas, I'll put up 72 with the references you talked about it. So as we look at 72, what areas of the living room did you process with luminol?
Some on the walls, but all the furniture, the table, and the rug, and the floor.
Okay. And I think I asked you this, but I want to be clear. There was no apparent crime scene as you entered like this.
No, not to me.
And then was there one place on the corner of the coffee table that you did a swab based on something that you might have seen?
Yes.
Okay. And was that was collected prior to the application of luminol?
Yes.
And then did you also apply luminol on that surface after that?
Yes, I did.
At this time, Your Honor, I'm going to approach the witness with Peoples 160 through 169.
All right.
So, Mr. Clayton, can you please review People's Exhibits 160 through 169?
I have.
Okay. Have you seen those images before?
Yes, I have.
Are those images of the reaction of the luminol in the living room?
Yes, they are.
And are those fair and accurate images of what you observed in the living room?
Yes, they are.
Now, are there two sets of each of those images?
Yes,
So there's a 160 and a 161 that documents the same location,
correct.
and a 162 and a 163 that documents the same location,
Correct.
and a 164 and a 165,
That is also correct.
166, 167.
That is correct.
And a 168 and a 169.
Correct.
Now, is there one set of those photographs that has a darker exposure to it and one that has a lighter exposure to it?
Yes.
Have you reviewed the photos in detail?
Yes,
Does the darker and the lighter ones each accurately capture what you saw in the room when you were in there?
yes, they do.
And are they consistent in terms of the only difference between them is the overall lighting in the entire photograph?
That is correct.
And do the lighter ones make it a little bit easier to see some of what's there?
I think so, yes.
Objection, move to strike, testifying about these exhibits before they've been admitted as evidence.
It's fine, don't worry about it.
So Judge, I'm going to move at this time to admit People's Exhibits 160 through 169 into evidence.
Mr. Bogan?
Objecting to 161 as an enhanced photo, enhanced by the prosecution.
Well, hold on a second. How do you know that?
That's how it was discovered to us.
As I stated, Your Honor, the entirety of the picture, as the witness stated, has been brightened. That's the only
I thought
difference.
he said he had different exposure. So it wasn't the photograph, it was something that changed.
Correct. The entire image itself was made brighter, consistent with more exposure. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. I just thought it was two different pictures being taken of the same thing. So your objection is because it's been enhanced?
Because it's been enhanced by the prosecution as to 161, Judge.
Okay.
And I'm gonna make this record as to several photographs.
Sure, I understand.
Should I go forward with that, or you want to rule
Why
one?
not?
Okay. Same objection as to 163. That's a photograph that has been enhanced by the prosecution. 165 has been enhanced by the prosecution. 167 enhanced by the prosecution. 169 enhanced by the prosecution.
That's every other one.
I'm sorry?
I said that's every other one.
Right. It's basically the odds and what have been submitted to the court and the witness. And from our perspective, there was original exposure of these photographs, and then they were enhanced after they were taken by the prosecution. And when you add that kind of information to an exhibit as opposed to taking information out, that is problematic. It is not a it's problematic as far as admitting it as an exhibit. It's problematic as far as it being a fair and accurate representation of what was actually photographed at the time.
I'm sure that's correct, Mr. Bogan. I mean, photographs react differently in terms of what you can see and what you can't. I'm not hearing anything that they added anything or they took anything out. There was testimony that you could see what was there better in the photographs. Maybe lay a little foundation as to what he saw versus the lighter versus darker photographs.
And Your Honor, he's testified that these are consistent with what he saw on scene as fair and accurate. So I can add more foundation as to how they're different in that it's the entirety of the picture that's brighter. Would that be helpful, Judge?
Yes.
Okay.
Permission to respond to the court's.
Sure.
From our perspective, the prosecution did add material to these photographs when they added that light. When they added, and that light resulted in more vibrant colors, AKA blue. That's an addition to how these photographs originally existed, and that's problematic.
How the photographs exist and what he saw are two different things, is what I was trying to express. I don't think I did that very well. So if you could clarify that.
Yes. So Agent Clayton, when you look at these photographs, are the same areas blue in the photographs?
Yes,
And you can see that if you look very closely.
correct.
Did the brighter version of those photographs make it just easier to see what you saw in person?
Correct.
And are any of these pictures where only the blue's made brighter, or are these pictures where the entirety is just made brighter so the jury can see what you were looking at?
The second half of your statement is correct. The odd picture is easier to discern the stain, what is reacting with the luminol.
And no particular part of the picture was targeted for brightening. It's just as though you, like, for example, sometimes a monitor is dark or an exposure is dark. These are made lighter.
Correct.
At this time, I would renew my motion to admit, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to admit I'm going to overrule the objection. Also, 160 through 169 are admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. So before we talk about, before I publish the luminol pictures, I want to talk about a different concept just briefly. So you talked about how they fade in and then they fade out, right?
Correct.
Is there any substitute for being on scene and actually watching that process?
No, I think that's valuable.
Okay. But in terms of the FBI photographer, is he trying to catch an image just to document where something was recovered?
Objection, foundation. I don't think he can speak to what the photographer's intention was.
Well, they can speak to what his reason for having the photographer do what there was, and I don't see a problem. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So is the purpose of taking these photographs in a crime scene investigation to document where the evidence is located?
Correct.
Is this a pretty quick process where you have to get the picture because of the fading in and fading out?
Yes, you'll want to have your camera set up and ready when I start applying the luminol. It will come on very quickly and it will fade probably within 30 seconds.
And we've all seen on TV when they put a ruler next to a piece of evidence, you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Is that something that's typically done in this type of scenario?
No, you don't want to cover up part of what you're spraying. I don't know where I'm going to get a positive reaction, so I have to put that ruler down 20 times in the living room. If I get a stain, then that's why we photograph it, is to know where it is. We already know it's very light colored, if you can see it at all.
So you're spraying not knowing if you'll get a reaction?
Correct.
If you get a reaction, the photographer's taking the photographs, so you know where you got the reaction. And then as that reaction fades out, then what do you do to mark the spot where the reaction was?
I take a swab that area, and then break the handle of the swab so I know where that stain was on the floor.
And that handle, is that like a wooden stick?
And it's just a big medical Q-tip sort of thing, cotton tip. They are sterile, they're sealed. I get one out at a time, or these come in packages of 2, so I'll get 2 out at one time.
And now in an instance where you can't see the blood with the naked eye, now you have a reaction. Are you swabbing just a little spot of it, or are you swabbing to the best of your ability to get enough material to test?
My goal is to get enough material to be able to send it to the lab. Again, I'm spraying a water-based chemical on a stain that I can't see. I don't want to wait very long, or I'll lose where it was and I'll have to reapply. I don't want to water it down. So it's a relatively fast process. When the luminol is ready, it's mixed up, and I spray it. The photographer must be ready, and I must be ready if there's a positive reaction to mark it and collect it.
Okay. And so when you tested in this case, were you swabbing micro areas or swabbing broader types of swabs and swabs that you did collect?
It depends on the stain. If the stain is over a large area, I would swab that area. If the stain is concentrated in one area, I will just swab where it's positive. Just depends on where I get my positive.
Okay. With that, Your Honor, could we dim the lights on this side of the courtroom, please?
Yes. See the middle one there?
All right, so at this time, Mr. Clayton, I'm going to start by publishing People's Exhibit 160. So where in the living room are we looking at in 160?
You can orient yourself. If you remember, this is the living room. That's the coffee table and the rug. You can just see the corner of the couch, or the bottom of the couch at the top left of the screen.
And then I'm going to go back to 72 briefly. When you go to 72, perhaps I should have done this earlier, but I'll do it now. The back wall, what direction? North, south, west, what direction?
North.
What direction is the wall to the right of
The wall with the door is facing east.
It's like the east wall.
East wall, yeah, from inside.
Let me hit you with the east wall. Going back to People's Exhibit 160, is that then the northeast corner of that coffee table? Is that accurate?
I believe it's the northwest.
The north, so is that the base of a couch?
Yes.
Let me take you back to 72. So you can see the base of the couch there. You can see the corner of the coffee table. So is that corner of the coffee table going to be that northeast corner?
May I point to where I think it was.
Sure. Yeah, and before you do, did you create a diagram in case there was not a diagram?
The FBI ERT did a diagram on that.
Did you review that?
I did,
Is that fair and accurate?
yes.
Would you hope to have that diagram as you walk through like individual photographs?
I think it would be.
Okay. Let me, with that, Judge, I'm going to approach exhibit 172.
All right.
So, Mr. Clayton, have you seen People's Exhibit 172 before?
I have.
Okay. Is that a exhibit that you've had time to
Please
review?
back to the lectern.
Yes, Your Honor. Is that an exhibit you've had time to review in detail?
It is,
Did you have the individual photos at the time that you reviewed that?
yes,
And then the FBI casebook that kind of documents locations, rooms, things like that?
yes,
Is People's 172 fair and accurate depiction of the results that you got when you processed this living room?
yes, it is.
Judge, at this time, I've moved to admit People's 172 into evidence.
Any objection?
Objection as to more prejudicial than probative, cumulative. This is all coming in through a slew of other sources, Judge.
Well, it's coming in now, Judge, admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Clayton, does that help you orient a little bit into the room?
Yes,
All right. And then I'm going to publish it just so the jury knows what we're talking about, but then I'm going to take you to the individual photos so you can walk them through what you found. Does that make sense?
yes,
Okay. So this is the diagram you have in front of you?
correct.
And then it talks about some of the results in the boxes that will show the jury individually and point to where they're from there.
That's correct.
So I want to go back to, I think we were at 160, correct?
Yes,
So 160. Can you use the diagram to orient yourself and tell the jury what part of the room it is?
I was mistaken. That is the northeast corner of the coffee table.
And is it fair to say those are where the two couches come together?
Yes,
And then 161, for the jury's reference, is that just an example of the brighter version?
yes,
This particular, this is the same exact corner and the same exact reaction we observed?
yes, it is.
Did you swab this location?
Yes, I did.
And then did you do further testing on it?
I believe I did a phenolphthalein on this one.
Why did you do phenolphthalein?
Again, two separate tests that indicate the presence of blood are better than just one.
And did you also, in reviewing People's 172, did that document the testing you did and the results as well? That's all put in that place?
That's correct.
So when we're talking about this, was there a particular item number, and then can you tell the jury what testing you did on it?
Well, this was CBI item number 1. It was FBI item 12, and the Sheriff's Office number 15. It gets very confusing with all the numbers, I know.
And are those numbers assigned as the items passed along in the chain of custody and ultimately goes to the lab?
Correct.
Let's just, for purposes of this, talk about CBI number 1. CBI number 1 is the swab you took from the corner of the coffee table.
The swabbing, I think I had 2 swabs.
Okay. When you swabbed that, did you do further testing on it?
I'm sorry, I did phenolphthalein on that also. Luminol and phenolphthalein.
What were the results of the phenolphthalein?
Both were positive.
Okay. And then would you typically do the hemotrace to make sure it's human blood as well?
If I deem there's enough sample there, I don't want to use up very much sample. We're talking about something I can't see.
Thank you. Let's move on to People's Exhibit 162. So do you, are you able to orient the jury as to where in the living room people's 162 would be?
Oops. I believe that's the top of the couch.
At the top, you mean this is the seat cushion at the top, and then what's down below?
That's where your legs would be. And I'm not sure what that's called.
Okay. And when you say the couch, there's a couch and a love seat in there. Does the diagram help orient you as to where in the living room that'd be?
I'm sorry, it's taking you so long.
Take your time.
Yeah, we want it right, just take your time.
For purposes, Mr. Clayton, just given the jury a distinction, on the north wall has the 3 cushions. We're going to refer to that as the couch, and then on the east wall has we're going to refer to the love seat that has that sort of median area in it. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, so in the diagram, are there places on the love seat that you see that correspond with the reaction that you saw here?
Yes, I believe that's the north cushion,
So you're looking at,
the love seat.
let's put up the diagram 172. So do you see this, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
See the photograph at the bottom there?
I'm so twisted around right now, I'm sorry. That is correct. What it's published is correct. It's the south cushion on the love seat.
South meaning closest to the front of the picture.
Correct.
And then this blue line here is indicating you see the corresponding photograph is indicating to the base basically of we're calling the love seat.
That is correct.
Is that helpful in sort of orienting what you reviewed previously?
Yes.
So I'm going to go now to 163. This is a brighter version of that.
That is correct. You can still see the 2 broken handles for the swabs.
Are those what you were referring to in terms of where you mark the areas that you swapped?
That's how I know I've collected from that area, yes.
So this was an area that you swapped?
Correct.
Can you kind of see the luminol running off it a little bit from the water that was applied?
The lower stain under the seam, you can actually see water carrying what I think is, at this point, is a very good dilution of a possible blood stain. And that's what I don't want to have happen.
And when you swab this, are you swabbing the general area or a particular point? What are your swabs catching here?
At this point, it's a general area. I'm going to try and maximize the amount of stain I have on my swabs.
Is that why you put the sticks at the 2 locations stick?
Correct.
164. When you look at 164, I know you have the pointer. Can you show the jury the areas of interest in 164?
Please do. You can take it out if you want to, or just stand next to it.
Here's an area right here, and that area was right in here for this stick.
So the previous picture you had mentioned was down by the leg.
Under this seam.
Right. Perhaps I shouldn't have showed you this picture first because it was more out. Right? That picture was more in.
Correct.
This makes it even easier to kind of see that this is that south.
Yes,
And then you see pockets of reaction here.
that is correct.
Did you swab those as well?
I did.
I'm going to move to 165. It's just an alternate view of that with a different light.
Yes, it's just been lightened up. You can see the blue is where the blue was, and you cannot see some of this down in here as well. I
make it harder to see
and that's what, yes, that's why we would darken the windows with trash bags.
And then can you show the jury the areas of interest?
You can see some areas here in particular very well.
And then above that book, is there an area of interest as well?
Yeah. Anything that's kind of showing you a blue shade is an area of interest for me.
Let me move to 166. So where was 166?
This is actually a view of the floor under the carpet, which the carpet was under the coffee table. We did the coffee table, got a little stain off that. We removed the coffee table. I did the top of the carpet and the bottom of the carpet. I did not get a reaction, a luminol reaction on the carpet. And this is actually on the floor under the carpet, near the edge of where the coffee table would have been.
So under the carpet, but the carpet itself had no blood on it.
That is correct.
And then this is 166. I'm going to show 167. Is that the alternate version, the brighter version of that?
Correct. It's the same area.
So can you see all the same locations?
Yes.
And then I'm going to go back before I move on. I'm going to go to 172. Can you just show the jury the area of the room that you were just talking about?
It's under this carpet at this edge of the table.
We call that the more.
Yes.
There's not a lot of exposed floor there, like a photograph.
At that point, the table and the rug had been removed.
We move on to 168. Okay. There's a different location in the living room.
Yes, it is.
And then is it helpful to look at the diagram? I know it's there's not as much context in this photograph, but if you needed to, or can you tell where in the room that is?
I know, again, it's on the floor under the carpet, but I'm not exactly sure where that was.
You'll be able to look at the diagram that you previously reviewed, see where it corresponds to, so we can show the jury.
Yes, I don't want to guess. I just simply can't recall.
So, Mr. Clayton, you can come right to the table and look at the diagram for the corresponding picture. I'll put it up for the screen.
This was just in front of the love seat.
That'd be kind of, I guess we could call that the southeast area of the living room.
Correct.
I think we were at 168. So 169. Is that an alternate version of that same picture?
Yes.
Bob there as well?
There's a broken handle, and at the tip of the broken handle, you can still see a reaction with the luminol.
I'm going to go to 170. Oh, I'm sorry. Judge, may I approach the people's exhibits? Yes. 170 and 171. I'm showing you people's exhibits 170 and 171. In those images as well.
Yes, I have.
So we talked about entrance photos and photos of how it appeared when you got there and people's exhibit 72. Are these different than that?
Yes.
And what are these?
These are called exit photos. This is a condition we're leaving the residence in.
Okay. And can you see sort of the film left behind by the chemical processing on the furniture?
Yes.
Are those fair and accurate as to how the living room looked when you were in there when the exit photos were taken?
That is correct.
Judge, at this time, I move to admit people's 170 and 171 into evidence.
No objection.
They'll be admitted.
May I publish here?
You may.
So when you look at 170, is that the, let me ask you this, when you do a search warrant, put them back?
Not normally, no.
Okay.
Yes.
You can see drugs look like it's in the family, but
Yeah, there's if you can remember, there's a much larger gap between the love seat and the edge of the table.
So, for example, people 72, the rug much closer to the base of the left seat.
Yes,
70, this is how you replace it for the home basically when you're done.
correct. It's pretty close to the location, but it is, I can tell it's been moved.
Then 171 also after that.
Yes.
So I want to move on, Agent Clayton, to 172. Does this help you explain to the jury your findings when you process the living room as a whole?
I believe it does, yes.
And does it accurately capture the areas that you swabbed within the living room?
Yes,
So I want to start with CBI 1, that's to the upper right-hand corner of the screen.
correct.
And that's going to be the couch, correct?
That's correct.
Did you test that for phenolphthalein as well?
Yes, I did.
And then did you send it off to the lab for serology?
Technically, no. I gave that to the FBI ERT team.
And FBI and ERT team collected all the evidence in the case?
It sounds all picky, and I'm not trying to be that way. I collected, but I gave the custody of that to another agency.
Okay, can I interrupt you? Because I had written down that earlier, CBI 1 was swabbing the swabbings of the corner of the coffee table. Is that incorrect?
Yes, Your Honor, I think we're going to correct that right now.
All right, thank you.
So what I'll also do, Mr. Clayton, is approach with the swabs themselves so you can look at the packaging and numbering. Does that make sense?
Okay?
Judge, may I approach with People's Exhibits 151 through 156?
Yes.
Counsel want to see them?
I know what's going on.
So we'll go through those in a minute, but I want to make sure that we're using the correct numbers and that we're clear here on the results that you've got in front of you on the diagram. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So let's start with CBI item number 1. Where did you collect swabs for CBI item number 1?
It was off the couch on the cushion part.
Was that based on seeing a luminol reaction?
Yes.
Then did you apply phenolphthalein?
Yes.
Did you get a positive result?
Yes, I did.
And then what do you do with the swabs what do you do after that?
These swabs come packaged in a small piece of paper. They're sterile. I open that up. If I get a positive, I swab that area, I write on the paper, and then stick the swabs back in their container. So I know where the stain is, what its number is, and what's inside of it. It's as clean as I can keep it.
Did you do that here?
I did.
And then it's packaged up in a evidence envelope?
Correct.
And then is it typically sealed by whomever is collecting the evidence?
That is correct.
Not collecting. How did you put it?
They're storing it.
Storing, gathering, after you've collected it. They're
They're
gathering it. And then they'll package it, et cetera.
Correct.
And will you sign it to indicate that it's correct what they have?
Yes.
All right. So item 1 is the couch tested, luminol indicated, positive phenolphthalein, packaged up and put in an envelope.
That is correct.
Item 2, what was item 2?
CBI item 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Direct your attention to the bottom right part of the screen.
Yes, I'm sorry. It was from the, that is correct, the love seat south cushion.
Okay. And what testing did you do on that?
The same. I had a positive luminol, so I tested it with phenolphthalein. Both tests were positive.
Did you also package that up?
Yes, as I said, I would have opened the package, put the swabs back in, one swab, then given those to whoever is keeping the evidence.
CBI number 3, what was that?
Is luminol reaction under the rug and under the coffee table on the floor.
Okay. And did you test that after the luminol reaction?
The same way. It was a positive luminol, so I did a phenolphthalein. Both tests were positive.
Then item number 4 is not on the chart. Was that from a different room in the house?
Yes.
And then item number 5, what's the item number 5 CBI?
That, again, is under rug, but it's in front of the love seat.
And did you test that as well after you had seen the luminol reaction?
With a positive luminol, I did a positive phenolphthalein and collected it.
Packaged up to the lab?
Correct.
And then CBI 6, where was that?
That's the coffee table itself.
What did you do in that?
I believe I had enough stain that I ran an ABBA card on this also. So I have positive luminol, positive phenolphthalein, and a strong indication for human blood.
What did you do after you did those tests?
Swabbed the area, collected it, and packaged it as I deemed appropriate.
Now, when you package it, let me draw your attention to the exhibits in front of you. Are they numbered consistent with the CBI numbers that are here? Judge, we can turn the lights on. Maybe it would be helpful. Thank you.
They are.
Okay. And so you have 6 different exhibits in front of you, 151, 152, 153, 154, 155, and 156, correct?
And I'm sorry, what did you start with?
151.
Correct.
Okay. And when you look at those, do you see your signature on them?
I do.
Okay. Can you look at all 6 of them, please? You can take them out of the box, it's fine.
Sorry. Yes, they all have my signature on them.
May I approach you, Honor?
You may.
Start with 151, 152, and 153. Do those all have your signature on them?
Yes.
Do they have a description on them of where the item was located?
Yes.
And then do they also have another person that observed it?
Yes.
Do they have an item number that is a CBI item?
Yes.
Is 151 item 1?
Yes, it is.
152 item 2?
Yes.
And 153 item 3?
Yes.
Now going through 154, 155, and 156 now. Do each of these also bear your signature?
Yes, they do.
And is 154 item number 4 from CBI?
That is correct.
And is 155 item number 5 from CBI?
Yes, it is.
And is 156 item number 6?
Yes, it is.
These are samples that you collected.
Correct.
And then is there FBI tape on it as well with a date on it?
As you can obviously see, there's different colors of tape on it. Yes.
And the red tape is the FBI.
I believe that's correct. Ours is blue.
Does it say Federal Bureau of Investigation that has the date from the certain contract?
It does.
And then the blue tape, that tape recognized from what the after that.
After CBI lab test, yes.
And then is there also an FBI number and a Plata County number on each of these that you've reviewed that correspond to the science?
That is correct.
And when you were done packaging these, Mr. Clayton, and you hand them over, the FBI collects them, they seal them up, and then who do they go to there? Who stores the evidence ultimately when you do an agency assist like this?
The agency itself.
So that'd be La Plata County Sheriff's Office.
I believe so, yes.
And then that's why they also have a number on there. You would hand it ultimately to them to take to their department.
Correct.
And then they have a property and evidence section where they would log it in?
Yes. So does the CBI.
Okay. All right, at this time, Judge, I'm going to take the exhibit down. So I'm going to move to admit People's Exhibits 151 through 156 into evidence at this time, Your Honor.
No objection.
Okay, they're admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Should I collect them?
Yeah, as long as you want to put them back on the table, please.
So, Mr. Clayton, let's talk about the photographs versus what you saw on scene. Are the photographs themselves basically a representation of a moment in time during that process you explained?
That's correct.
Was there, is it a situation where you can take those pictures and do any kind of spatter analysis from them?
I don't believe there's enough blood there to really make a pattern out of it.
And now you testified earlier that you were an expert in blood spatter analysis in other cases.
That's correct.
Do you think it's reasonable or responsible to be able to make any kind of conclusions about blood spatter analysis from these photographs?
There's just not enough blood, no.
How about the type of injury? Is that something that you would ever opine on based on seeing photographs like this?
No, I would not.
Why not?
There's a whole lot of ways to have a bloodletting event. I'm not there when that event has occurred. I would not speculate or guess on that.
All kinds of injuries can produce all kinds of bleeding.
Sure.
And then also, let me ask you about the crime scene itself and your assessment when you were in there. So based on the totality of walking through the home, being in the home, having done 1,000 crime scenes before, did you have any takeaways from it, anything that caught your attention?
Objection, form of the question, vague, confusing, goes to the ultimate issue to be determined by the jury. What did you think about this?
A witness can testify as the ultimate conclusion by the jury. That's not objectionable, and the rest of it's not vague. I think that's confusing. Overruled.
Were there observations you made being in person on this crime scene that were suspicious?
Yes.
In your expert opinion, having done 1,000 crime scenes, what was concerning to you?
Two areas of interest grabbed my attention. First and foremost was the blood under the carpet. If blood had been deposited on top of the carpet and soaked through, the carpet should have given me a positive luminol reaction. It did not. The blood on the couch and love seat, of course, they were dark brown leather to begin with, very difficult to see, not a lot of blood there, but it looked like it had been perhaps cleaned up. Something had happened here to make that blood that dilute.
And generally speaking, if you go into an area and you don't see blood with the naked eye, but then there's blood in various locations of the room, does that indicate that the blood was somehow removed?
To me, yes, very much so.
Now, you talked about false positives potentially from certain cleaning agents. Are there other methods of cleaning that would not leave any kind of false positive reactions?
Sure.
Can you just explain for a second to the jury that?
A Kleenex, a dry towel, soap and water, just a wet towel. There's a number of ways of cleaning a stain up like that.
Would it be fair to describe this as, because you couldn't see it with the naked eye, that there was very little blood left on the scene?
That is correct.
Would it also be fair to say that the blood that you did recover spanned a pretty broad area of that living room?
Objection, the evidence speaks for itself. Pretty broad area, leading.
I'm going to overrule the objection, but it is somewhat leading. So if you want to, I'm going to grant the leading objection and ask it differently and overrule the other objection.
Yes, Your Honor. With reference to the area in the living room, was it one particular spot or there were various spots as documented in the diagram?
There are various spots throughout the living room, various areas of interest I had. It was not just centralized in one place.
So even though the volume, for whatever reason, wasn't much, the area was?
Correct.
Is that concerning to you as well as a crime scene investigator?
If you had...
relevant, was that concerning to you?
It's relevant. Go ahead.
If I had found stains in one area, I would think you had a localized bloodletting event, but this showed some sort of movement. You have it on various pieces of furniture and under the rug.
Now, when you send off the swabs to serology, if serology comes back with negative on some of the ones that you had, are there reasons that could be?
Yes.
What are they?
Objection, facts not in evidence. Serology hasn't testified yet as to those determinations.
Based upon previous hearings, Mr. Johnson, are you planning on putting that into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, as long as you tie it up, it's okay.
So are there times when you're needing luminol to see blood and you're doing the testing you're doing that you might send swabs off to Colorado Bureau of Investigation and get different results from serology than you got here?
That is correct.
Okay, what could be a reason for that?
There are a number of reasons that come to mind. One of them, I just may not have enough sample. Again, this is a sample you can't see, and I just diluted it with a water solution. So I may have used up pretty much all of my sample in my testing in the field. That's why I don't do very much when I'm at the crime scene. It could be, again, like dog blood or mouse blood that would react with those two chemicals, but it is in fact not human blood. I don't know that out there if I don't do that ABBA card, and I'm going to save all the sample I possibly can for the laboratory, not for the crime scene.
Just in case you didn't gather enough from the occult blood.
That's correct.
And then if you do get a result that's consistent with serology, what does that typically tell you, having worked in serology before?
That I was good at the crime scene collection and collected a proper sample and stored it properly and tested it properly and reported it properly.
So, Mr. Clayton, having processed over 1,000 crime scenes in your career, does every living room look like this?
No.
Is this, and in particular, there was a bedroom, for example, in the same house that you processed, and did you find any reaction in that room?
No, I did not.
But here you found it multiple places.
That is correct.
Is that suspicious and concerning to you as a crime scene investigator, given there was a missing child?
Objection is the form of the question, suspicious.
I find it, trying to think of another word, but yeah, I find that suspicious to me at the scene.
In your experience over 20 years, over 1,000 crime scenes?
Correct.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Bogan, please. Do you need a second, Aaron? Okay.
I'm going to need to retrieve the HDMI cable as well.
Go ahead. Let's wait a second, Mr. Bogan.
Of course.
You in? All right, go ahead.
Going back to the work you did on this case at the house you've been talking about for about an hour and a half, you testified on direct. It was your understanding that you arrived at this house 10 days after Dylan went missing, correct?
That is correct.
And you arrived with what you called what was like FBI evidentiary retrieval team?
An ERT,
And what does ERT stand for?
Evidence Response Team.
Okay. And that included members from Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
CBI agents were there, but we are not FBI. We're not affiliated with them.
Right. CBI was there.
Correct.
Several agents from CBI.
Correct.
Also, FBI was there, correct?
That is also correct.
And La Plata County Sheriff was there.
Yes.
And you all caravanned up to the area, correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
Were you part of the caravan? I mean, you testified to it.
Yes, I didn't know where we were going. I was just following.
And safe to say, there were a lot of people, a lot of law enforcement that arrived to conduct this investigation, correct?
I'm not sure what a lot means, but there were probably 8 to 10 that I can think of.
At least 8 to 10 from 3 different agencies.
In my recollection.
Now, you talked on direct about your process for looking for evidence, documenting evidence, and collecting evidence. And I want to go through that real quick, okay?
All right.
You said on direct that initially you do what you call an initial walkthrough, an initial assessment.
That is correct.
And during that initial assessment, you go in to just kind of identify what kind of work, if any, you can do that day, correct?
No, I wouldn't characterize it as that.
You go in to see if there's any hazards.
Correct.
You go in to see if there's any obvious signs or any obvious evidence that needs to be collected.
That is true.
You go in to assess the area to see if you have enough people to do the job.
That is also correct.
And that's part of your initial assessment.
That is correct.
See if there's hazards, see if there's obvious evidence, see if you got enough people to collect the evidence and do the investigation.
That is correct.
And as part of your initial walkthrough, in this case, you went through the entirety of the house, correct?
I was in each room, yes.
Upstairs and downstairs, right?
That is correct.
And then after you do that initial assessment, you meet with the team and you determine if you have enough people to do the investigation, correct?
I do that, yes.
And you determined that in fact you did, right? Because you did the investigation inside the house.
That is correct.
And then you go back into the house again, right?
Yes.
And is that the process for which you go room by room, start in a corner and go clockwise?
Actually, I think I said counterclockwise, but yeah, I go in the room and start assessing and collecting.
And you go room by room?
I do.
And explain to the jury again what you mean by assess and collect when you go room by room.
Well, again, this is not like a TV show. I don't know where the evidence is, if there's any evidence, so I have to do a very thorough examination. I look on top of, in between, and under everything, and I very much appreciate a second set of eyes coming along and looking at my stuff after I've looked at it. This is not an ego thing for me. I want to find a stain if it's in there. If there's a weapon, I want to find that. So it's a very detailed and thorough search of the area.
And based upon your expertise of going to thousands of crime scenes, you know how to look for clues and evidence.
Well, yeah, I don't think I said thousands.
Well, Mr. Johnson did, and several times, and you affirmed that.
When I gave the answer, I thought I said just over 1,000.
Okay.
If I did, I misspoke. It's just over 1,000.
Having been to over 1,000 crime scenes, you know how to find evidence of violent struggles and fights, correct?
If it's present, yes.
Okay. And you've been trained on what could be indicators of a violent interaction or a fight or a bloodletting event, correct?
Correct.
And those indicators could include broken or moved furniture.
It could.
It could include obvious weapons, like the example you gave, if there's a baseball bat.
That would be true, yes.
And generally, if an area is unkept or messy, that could be evidence of a struggle or fight as well, correct?
It could be. Some houses just are in disarray from a lifestyle, not necessarily from a fight.
And in your initial walkthrough, I want to focus your attention on that. You didn't find any evidence of a violent struggle or a fight or bloodletting event in your initial walkthrough, correct?
That is correct.
And that was the initial walkthrough through the entirety of the house, right?
That's the only initial walkthrough I did, but yes, it involved every room.
Every room. And then you came back and you did the room by room counterclockwise, correct?
That is correct.
And then after you did the second walkthrough, then you applied the luminol, if I'm understanding you correctly.
That is correct.
So it sounds like we got 3 walkthroughs here, is that correct?
I'm trying really hard not to be picky, but second and third time I go through there is not a walkthrough. The initial walkthrough is an assessment.
You're right.
The rest is processing.
You're right. So we got kind of 3 investigations and with the investigation, and stick with me on this answer because I know you'll let them know if I get something wrong. There's the initial walkthrough, then there's the first assessment, and then there was the final assessment with the luminol. Is that correct?
No. There's
an
initial walkthrough, which is an assessment. It's not a collection. And then I go in and I process. If I get anything positive, then I will collect. There there are different stages to the crime scene investigation. There's an initial walkthrough, an assessment, then I actually start my work of collecting the evidence.
Going through every room, you went into the kitchen, correct?
That is correct.
And that's to the left of the living room, if you recall. And we can get there in a second if you don't remember where the kitchen was in this house.
I do remember it. I'm sorry, to me, it just depends on which way you're facing.
Coming into the house, living room's going to be on your right, kitchen's going to be on your left.
That is correct.
Permission to approach, Judge.
Yes.
The witness.
Yes.
Mr. Clayton, I'm going to approach with what's been previously marked as Defense Exhibit 1166, 1005, 1045, 1046, 1167. I'm going to ask you to look at those, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions, okay?
Fine. I've reviewed them.
Okay. Hold on, because I'm not caught up yet. I got to keep track of all these. All right, I'm ready when you are, Mr. Bogan.
Thank you. All of the exhibits I handed you, are those fair and accurate representations of the kitchen that you investigated on November 29th, 2012?
Yes,
Given that they're a fair and accurate representation, you remember how they look, I'd move for the admission of all those exhibits.
I have no objection, Your Honor.
All right, hold on. And so 6.6 and 6.7 then are also pictures, correct?
Everything's a picture, yes, sir. Or I don't know if you were asking me.
I was asking you.
Yes, sir.
Just a second. I gotta go back up. Just don't do anything. All right, go ahead. They're admitted. Excuse me.
I'd draw your attention to Defense 1166 and ask to publish.
Go ahead.
Can you describe for the jury what we're seeing here?
this is the east wall of the kitchen. And a little bit of the south wall with a refrigerator.
And as you've already testified to, this kitchen, as you come into the room, to the left of where the living room is, right?
Correct.
Okay. And permission to move about while we're talking about these, if I keep a microphone in hand, Judge?
If you do.
Safe to say the front door is right here in the house that you investigated?
Yes, it is.
And then the kitchen goes back and away from the viewer, correct?
That is correct.
And this is one of the rooms that as you described to the jury, you did a very exacting search where you were looking for evidence, correct?
That is correct.
And based upon your professional experience analysis of this kitchen, at least this part of the kitchen, you didn't collect any evidence from it, correct?
I did not.
And I take it the kitchen, this area here is featured in this photograph, fell into the unremarkable part of the house, correct?
That's correct.
And to be clear, based upon your professional analysis, this part of the kitchen did not have any evidence of a violent struggle or bloodletting event.
My expertise that day was to look for blood or body fluids.
Right.
That's what I was doing. I did not see any in the kitchen.
You didn't see any in the kitchen, but you also said as part of your analysis is to look for evidence of that you are qualified on how to find evidence of a bloodletting event or violent altercation, correct? And certainly if you would have seen something like that in the kitchen, you would have documented that and pointed that out to one of the several other law enforcement agencies there, correct?
That is accurate.
Okay. And that didn't happen here, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
And you didn't collect any biological evidence from this part of the house either?
No?
Turning your attention to defense 1005, permission to publish.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have the exhibit in front of you, sir?
I do?
Okay. And here we can see a little bit more of the same kitchen in the same house, correct?
Correct.
And what's added in this photo is we can see a table and a stove and more of the refrigerator, correct?
That is correct.
And we can see a wood-burning stove and underneath it tile there, correct?
That is also correct, yes.
And again, you did your exacting analysis of this part of the kitchen as well, correct?
That is correct.
Including that table, the floor, the wood-burning stove, the corner behind those, correct?
That is correct.
And based upon your expert analysis, you didn't collect any evidence from there.
That is also correct.
And that was because in your expert analysis, there was no bloodletting event or violent action in that part of the house based upon your investigation.
I found no blood or body fluid of interest in the kitchen.
And you found no stains of interest.
Correct.
And you found no overturned furniture.
That's correct.
And you found no weapons.
I would not say that.
What weapons did you turn over from the kitchen that day?
I said, when I look at this picture, there's a large piece of wood on the floor in front of the stove. That's a possible weapon to me.
Right. That's a possible weapon to you, and that's why you pointed that out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, La Plata County Sheriff's Department, and directed them to bag that, and that's why it's in evidence to this day.
I did not do that, no.
You did not do that. And you knew what kind of case you were investigating, correct?
I had an idea, yes.
You knew it involved a missing child, correct?
Correct.
So you were taking this investigation very seriously, correct?
I take each of my investigations very seriously.
And you especially take an investigation of a missing child seriously.
I don't take it any more special or less special. It is a case for me.
And certainly if you thought that block of wood was a weapon that was involved in the disappearance of Dylan Redwine, you would have made sure that that got collected as a piece of evidence.
That is correct.
And you didn't do that.
Because I don't think it was used as a weapon.
You don't, and you don't think it was used in a fight?
It could be. I had no evidence on it. There was no blood, no hair, no trace. There's no reason for me to collect it at that point in time.
And if you had any reason for it to, you would have made sure that it was?
Just as I did the bloodstains, yes.
Turning your attention to defense 0145, permission to publish.
Yes.
Can you describe for the jury what we see in this picture?
This is just another picture of the kitchen and dining room area. You can clearly see where the stove is, the refrigerator, and you can see more of the table.
And Your Honor gave me permission to move about. Is that still?
It stands.
Thank you. Safe to say, looking at this exhibit, the kitchen would be on the viewer's, pardon me, the kitchen counter would be on the viewer's left, right? So it's kind of looking from the kitchen counter, past the refrigerator, past the table, past the stove, right?
That is correct.
And can you describe for the jury what that area is back there? Like a staircase to you?
Oh, yeah, there is a staircase back behind the stove, sort of.
And again, looking at the rest of the kitchen here and looking into the staircase, whatever you want to call it, foyer going into the staircase, you didn't collect any evidence from that part of the house?
I saw no blood evidence in that area, no.
And you saw no obvious stains or anything that warranted you informing other law enforcement to collect evidence?
That is correct.
I'm going to turn your attention to defense 1167. Do you have it?
I do.
Do you remember what part of the house this renders or portrays?
This is what I called like a little pantry underneath the stairs.
And is this another one of the rooms that you went through during your exacting analysis, looking for evidence?
Yes.
And safe to say, like in the other pictures of the kitchen here in this small room, we got foodstuffs, chair, carpet, looks like some cabinetry, correct?
That is correct.
And again, based upon your analysis of this, there was no evidence in there worth collecting, correct?
I found nothing in that room of evidentiary value.
Not obvious, not obvious, not biological, not trace.
Correct.
You also testified on direct that you went to, are you still contemplating that exhibit? I don't know.
No, I've got it here.
Okay. You also testified on direct that as part of your investigation, you went to the garage, correct?
That is correct.
And did you do the same analysis in the garage as you did in the rest of the rooms in the house?
Yes.
Okay. And again, that was starting in one corner, going counterclockwise, looking for areas of interest, right?
Correct.
Looking for evidence of a bloodletting event, looking for evidence of biological materials, correct?
That is correct.
Permission to approach the witness with defense exhibits.
Yes.
Or exhibit.
What number is it?
1075.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is defense 1075 a fair and accurate representation of the garage when you conducted your investigation on this matter on November 29th, 2012?
Yes, it is.
Move to admit defense.
Mr. Johnson?
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Permission to publish.
Yes.
Looks like there's a lot of stuff to investigate in the garage.
It's busy.
It's busy. And busy means different things to different people. Would you agree there appears to be a lot of items in the garage there?
Yes, tools, other mechanical items.
And again, you do the same analysis because you take every investigation seriously. Every analysis of every room is uniform. You do the same thing every time you go in, right?
No, I don't think I'm repetitive in that way. I do a thorough investigation based on what is in front of me.
Okay. And these items were in front of you in the garage.
Correct.
And you did the same thing that you testified during direct. You looked above, under, over, you opened drawers, correct?
I was looking for biologicals, yes.
Right. And the one biological you testified to on direct was a Band-Aid that you found, correct?
And in front of the mousetrap.
And in front of the mousetrap. And remind us again what happened with the mousetrap.
It did not indicate the presence of human blood.
And most likely, since it was blood by a mousetrap, it was probably mouse blood.
I made that assumption, yes.
And looking at defense 1075, you didn't collect any evidence, you didn't see any biological evidence from this portion of the garage, correct?
I don't remember where the mousetrap was, but I did collect the Band-Aid from the garage.
Okay. Do you see a mousetrap or a Band-Aid in that? Take your time.
I do not.
And understanding that the garage is busy, that there's many items in there, the only items that you seized from, that you took from the garage, that you tagged as evidence, were the Band-Aid and the swabs around the mousetrap, correct?
I did not collect the swabs from around the mousetrap. I just took the Band-Aid, or had the Band-Aid taken.
Right. What'd you do with the swabs from the mousetrap?
They're thrown in a biohazard bag and properly disposed of once I'm back at the Bureau.
Permission to approach the witness with 1077.
Yes.
I'll stipulate to admission if that's helpful.
All right. 1077 is admitted.
Drawing your attention to this exhibit, does that look like another part of the garage of the house that you investigated on November 29th, 2012?
Yes.
Okay. And do you see the mousetrap or the Band-Aid therein?
I do not.
And from this part of the garage, did you collect any evidence?
I simply can't recall where the Band-Aid was. I think it was near the door, the sliding door.
And but for the Band-Aid, when we refer to the garage, you didn't see any evidence of a bloodletting event or violent incident, correct?
No, I did not.
You also went to the upstairs bathroom in this house as well, correct?
That is correct.
Permission to approach with defense 1049.
Yes.
I'm going to rephrase the question because we want to keep on point here. You did the downstairs bathroom, correct?
That is correct.
Same process.
Correct.
1049.
We'll stipulate admission, Judge.
1049 is admitted.
Does that look like the photo you got? I don't think it is, and I apologize for that.
I believe it is.
Oh. Describe for the jury what we're seeing here, where this is located in the house.
I believe this was associated with the master bedroom. It's upstairs next to the master bedroom, obviously a door between there and the bedroom.
You're sure that's the upstairs and not the downstairs bathroom?
No, quite frankly, I'm not.
Okay. Suppose it's one of the bathrooms you investigated.
Okay?
When you investigated this room, you didn't find any evidence of a bloodletting event or violent incident, correct?
That is also correct. I did not.
And you didn't ask other law enforcement to collect any evidence from that room, correct?
No, I didn't ask them to collect any because I didn't see any and my partner hadn't seen any. There was no reason to collect anything.
And that kind of fits with your practice in that you don't document the negatives.
Correct. It would be tedious to have to say everything I did not find in each room.
So you're only documenting what you think, in your opinion, is relevant evidence in the investigation, correct?
Or would have any kind of evidentiary value, as we said before, like the baseball bat as an example or a weapon. If I were to find something, I would bring it to somebody's attention. If I don't find anything, I don't have any reason to alert somebody else to do that.
And, Your Honor, I probably have between 20 and 30 minutes to go, maybe 40.
Would you like to break for the night?
I'm asking you, I guess I'm asking Your Honor to ask the jurors.
Well, I was planning on doing it, asking you the question, how long you're going to go at about 5 o'clock.
Really?
So I guess you guys want to finish this up, or do you want to do it in the morning? I think we're going to have redirecting questions, so we may as well do the morning. I think that's a good idea. All right, we will take our evening recess. Please remember my admonitions. Don't talk about the case either amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Do not initiate, post, or respond to anything about this case on social media. Keep an open mind throughout the trial. Reach your decision only during your final deliberations. Don't talk to anybody about the case. Don't let anybody talk to you about the case. Don't gather any information on your own. Don't visit anywhere mentioned in the case. Don't read about it anywhere. And we will see you at 10 to 8. Well, we'll see you at 8, but you'll be here at 10 to 8 tomorrow. So thank you very much. Everybody rise for the dinner. Remember, we have the short lunch tomorrow. Okay, I do that all the time. All right, we can be seated. Anything else for the record tonight from the parties? No?
No,
All right, I don't want you to leave until we get the exhibit straightened out. We also need the exhibit, which was Amber Harrison's transcript, marked as, I have it written down somewhere.
For the record, Judge, I think you're saying Kathi Berry?
Excuse me, you're right, Kathi Berry. Mark, I should have found it. Marked as number 1900, so we need that. Rough. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you just had it. You know, I'm sure you're fascinated here.
Oh, sure. I can walk you. Oh, well.